These are going to be the top 5 decks for Legend with a budget deck, a dark horse, and my personal favorite also added on at the end. Nerfs are rumored to come out on the 20th of December. So if they do end up coming out on this date, I will come up with a new tier list. But as of right now, these are the best decks. And the first one is going to be Blessed Priest for 3 reasons. 1, a lot of people are playing Control Priest, so you can potentially just snowball and kill your opponent before they realize what actually ends up happening because they changed their mulligans. 2 is the fact that this deck runs Shard of Naru, which means it can beat probably the most popular deck in the game right now, Death Rattle Rogue. And then 3, Animate Dead is actually a pretty decent buff because on your big combo turn, it'll cost you 1 less mana to actually combo off. Basically, you play Radiant Elemental turn 2 and have it die. So on your big turn, instead of having to play Radiant Elemental, you can just play Animate Dead to resummon it for 1 less mana, and you can snowball just a little bit faster. This deck, although I'm not the biggest fan of it, I have to give credit where credit's due. And if you don't get big minions and stats and that is not able to win you the game, the Sunwell is at least an okay potential win condition as well. So the next deck on the list is going to be Death Rattle Rogue, and the only reason I'm putting it as number 2 is because this deck is public enemy number 1. Even though I think this deck is still the strongest deck in the game, everybody's running Smothering Starfish, people are running hard removal, people are running more aggro decks to kill this deck before it can actually pop off. It is the deck everybody is trying to beat right now. And because of that, I'm knocking it down a little bit because I don't think people should start playing this because 1, it might get nerfed, and 2, again, everybody's trying to counter it. So this deck is still really strong. If that did not deter you, I will say this deck is still very strong. You can sometimes get 4, 5, 8 taunts on turn 4. You go Shadow Shambler into Forsaken Lieutenant, into Snowfall Graveyard, into Burning Acolyte on turn 4. You rush into a minion as well. Next thing you know, you kill something and you get a ton of taunt minions. Not to mention the fact that you have really good reload with Smokescreen as well as Swiftskill Trickster. So this deck is still ridiculous, right? It should still probably be nerfed, but I think that because, again, it is public enemy number 1, it might not be as high on the tier list as it otherwise should be. The next deck on the list is going to be Big Spell Mage, and this is on here for 2 reasons this high. 1, I played this deck and did quite well with it. It actually dominated most of the games that I played. You're able to sometimes mess up your opponent with a Barbaric Sorceress, get rid of one of their spells and reduce the cost of yours, and just get a huge burst in tempo. Arcane Defenders right here is an amazing way to stall out against aggro decks. Just imagine if you're able to play it turn 5 or 6, depending on if you have Barbaric Sorceress, Belinda, the coin, all those things. And overall, this 1 addition made the deck significantly better. Not to mention Astelar can give you a little bit of extra armor and removal early game. And the fact that you have the same package Big Spell Mage had before, and it was actually a top 5 deck back then as well. So overall, this deck is really good, scales well into the late game with big spells and Magister, has an okay to pretty good early game, and overall, I would suggest giving this a chance. So the next deck on the list is going to be Control Priest. I know it says Quest Priest here, and it's on here because it is the higher win rate of the 2 Control Priest decks, but if you want to build a deck that revolves around Plague Spreader, Theatar, and a ton of disruption, as well as just a ton of hard removal, I would say that is pretty good. But Quest Priest has a slightly higher win rate because if you play against another slow deck, having this late game win condition that literally just says winning the game is very good. I personally like the Plague Spreader version better, and I will probably have a link to that in the description as well. But again, Quest Priest is a little bit more straightforward, has a clear-cut win condition, and is a little bit simpler to play. The next deck on the list is also kind of a combo. You can run just Imp Warlock or Curse Imp Warlock. I like Curse Imp Warlock more because you fight for board early, and if you do happen to lose control, you can kill them over the top with your abundance of curses. The issue with normal Imp Warlock is even though you can snowball harder, if your board does get wiped probably about 2 times, you do kind of fall behind and kind of just lose the game. This gives you a secondary win condition if you end up losing the board, but you're not as dominant early. So it really comes down to what your personal playstyle is. I like Curse Imp Warlock more, but I'm not really a huge fan of either of them to begin with, but hopefully you guys enjoy the main decks of this tier list. So now we're getting into the special decks, and the first one is going to be the best budget deck, which is Aggro Druid. This is, if anybody on stream or in the comments asks me for the best beginner deck, best budget deck, this is the one. It is straightforward and kind of one-dimensional, which means that more experienced players might not enjoy it as much, but new players who are learning the meta and learning the mechanics of the game will love a deck like this. They have one game plan, which is build a board and pump them in however many ways you can. Mark of the Wild, Herald of Nature, Pride's Fury, and any of the other cards. It's just pump the board. But it also is extremely cheap. It is 1,520 dust, which is less than a single legendary, which just makes it the perfect deck for a beginner. Do I recommend you play this deck once you hit Legend? No, it does start falling off once you hit Legend, even Diamond 5, but the win rate even in those categories is about 52%. So even though it falls off a little bit, it's still a very good deck, solidly in tier 2. The next deck on the list is going to be Quest Demon Hunter. This is the Dark Horse deck. Basically, if there was a 6th spot, this would be it. It was close between this and Miracle Rogue. I just think this deck is a little bit more consistent with its draw and removal. The idea of the deck is you want to draw as many cards as you can and reduce their cost with your quest, and then eventually Kurtrus. And then you want to play spell damage and either use the spell damage early with the Unleash Fel to survive, or use it later on in order to do damage to your opponent, and then reactivate everything with Jace. And if you can reduce the cost of Jace and play it along with some spell damage cards all in the same turn, you can actually do over 100 damage with this deck. It is absolutely nuts. And the last deck on the list is going to be my personal favorite deck, and that is Triple Blood Death Knight. I have put in Smothering Starfish to help against the Rogue and even Naga Priest matchup, as well as a couple of other things. You have a ton of Discover, some decent removal with Corpse Explosion, Blood Boil. You gain a ton of HP, which means you can potentially survive combo decks. You're in Patchwork, Mutanus, and Theatar, again, to try to disrupt your opponent and stop combo decks. And overall, I've played this deck a decent amount, and I am 8-3 with it, which is not the largest sample size, but it's honestly super duper fun. If you don't like control or slower games though, this is not for you. This deck is not for everyone. I just had to put my own personal spin and bias on this list. A notable deck that is missing is Ramp Druid, and let me explain why. People are probably gonna be like, Ramp Druid's broken, why is it not on this list? It's because it's actually not. Yes, it's really strong, and in a slower meta, you will be able to combo off and do a ton of damage with your opponent not really being able to do anything. But again, with a lot of disruption with things like Patchwork, Mutanus, as well as Theatar, with the Plague Spreader and Priest going around and potentially messing up Brands and Astalars, and the fact that there's a lot of aggro and miracle decks out there that can win games on turn 6, Ramp Druid just does not cut it anymore. Even though it's played 10 to 15%, which makes it, I think, the 3rd most popular deck, basically in every single category of rank, Legend and Diamond, which are the 2 with the highest sample sizes, and High Legend, Ramp Druid doesn't even break 50%, which just means it does not cut it anymore, or at least not right now until nerfs or buffs happen. I don't think it'll be bad forever. In fact, if you get good ramp, it can still feel broken. It's just not as strong as it was at the beginning, now that more aggro decks are optimized. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll hope to see you in the next one. And again, if nerfs and buffs come out, I'll make a new tier list as soon as I can.